Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, where we have conversations with experts and share personal stories to help navigate the complexities of mental health with compassion and empathy. I'm MommaFoxFire, and whether you're tuning in during your morning commute, on a relaxing evening walk, or maybe even while tackling that never-ending pile of laundry, hey, I see you. I'm so glad you're here. Before we dive into today's topic, I also want to take a moment and just say thank you for all the recent messages and comments that you've shared with me. Your words of support, encouragement, and the personal stories you send in mean the world to me. You are the heartbeat of this podcast, and I am endlessly grateful that you're here with me today. Now, let's get down to business. Today, we're exploring the intersection of eating disorders and sexual abuse. And yes, I know it's a heavy topic, but stick with me here. Because that's the thing about mental health struggles. They don't exist in isolation, and they're not always easy. They weave their way into every corner of our lives, often intersecting in ways we might not expect. And that's where today's conversation comes in. We're going beyond the surface, beyond the stereotypes, and beyond the stigma to unpack the complex relationship between eating disorders and sexual abuse. Because let's face it, these conversations aren't always easy, but they are so necessary. They're the conversations that spark understanding, empathy, and most importantly, healing. So whether you're someone who's walked this path yourself, or you're just here to learn and lend your support, I invite you to lean in, listen closely, and open your heart to what our incredible guest, Patty Cabot, has to share. Together, we'll navigate the messy, the uncomfortable, and the downright challenging parts of life. Because hey, even tacos fall apart sometimes, but that doesn't mean we stop loving them. And it certainly doesn't mean we stop loving each other. All right, let's jump into it. Get ready for an honest, enlightening, and ultimately hopeful conversation. Stay tuned. Oh, and it's backwards. Okay, I gotta fix one thing real quick. Because right now on my screen it shows you are MommaFoxFire and I am Patty Cabot, and that is just not the case. So give me just a second here. Hey chat, hey everybody who is here. Welcome. Give me just a minute to get this fixed because in true MommaFoxFire form, something's broken. So just hold on a second. This is always the way. This is how it goes. I have something that I have to fix. I have something that I forget. You know, it is what it is. There we go.
Exactly.
Welcome. Excuse me. Welcome, everyone. Hey, Vite. Hey, Tib. How are you guys today? Happy Mental Health Monday. I am super excited. Patty and I have been chatting before this, and I can already tell this is going to be a wonderful experience. For those of you who are here on Twitch, I guess a little bit of a warning because it would not let me title this stream appropriately. So we are going to be talking about the intersection of eating disorders and sexual abuse. I had to say childhood abuse on the stream. Those of you on YouTube, you are seeing the correct title and everything. So just if you're not interested in talking about those kinds of things, I understand. Do what you need to do for yourself, but just know that it would not let me title it appropriately. Twitch, what the fuck? What is wrong with you? So we are going to jump right in here. So Patty is super cool and has agreed to join us to talk about this. She actually just gave us a copy of her book. I did put that in the Discord, and also it's available on my Patreon in the free section as well. So if you're interested in reading that, make sure to check that out, and I'll provide some links to connect with her as well. But beginning in her teens, Patty battled drastic weight fluctuations of 50 to 75 pounds. Desperate to break the cycle and thinking it was what prevented her from meeting men, in her late 30s, Patty embarked on a therapeutic journey that led to her unresolved childhood sexual abuse. Despite Patty's great shame and reluctance to delve into the pain of her past, it became clear that her weight was merely a symptom of that abuse. Over 12 years, she worked with her therapist, an EMDR, a chiropractor, to release trapped fight or flight responses, a sex therapist, and attended group therapy for sexual abuse, which, as you all know already, that was a lot of things that I just listed, and it's a lot of work. Therapy in general is a lot of work. Well worth it, but a lot of work. Patty has maintained an approximately 100-pound weight loss for the past 15 years. She has published Not That Girl Anymore, a memoir about the alternative therapies she explored in the hopes of undoing the ruin within to claim the happiness that she and everyone else struggling with trauma deserves. And like I said, that is the book that is available. So if you are interested in connecting with Patty anywhere else, feel free to check this out. Make sure you join our Discord, check it out on Patreon to get everything that is free on Patreon. You don't have to pay anything. You don't even have to join. You can just go download it. So Patty, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be here with you, MommaFoxFire.
We're talking about, what do you call me? Before this, and Bite is here. So I was telling her, like, hey, my sister is in the community, and it was an adjustment to get her to call me MommaFoxFire also. But yeah, so those of you who are here on Twitch, we do have a question queue open. You can access that by typing !Q. Follow it with your question. That'll pop it into the chat, and I'll make sure to ask it of our guest. And then if you are here on YouTube, just make sure that you put your question in the chat, and we'll make sure to get that asked as well. And Bite is putting one in the chat right this moment. I'm pretty sure I know what she's going to ask. There it is. Her question is, what is your favorite poem?
Ooh, that's a good one. I actually have several poems that I love. I always loved Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. And it's just a great love poem about, his beautiful, dearly departed wife. I don't know if you've ever heard of Sappho. She is from the island of Lesbos, which is like from the 6th century. And she wrote these incredibly poignant poems where one of them was, pain penetrates me drop by drop. So that's so I love her. Those are the two I can think of immediately.
Those are good choices. We've had some Edgar Allan Poe answers on here with that question, but I don't think we've had the Sappho one. So that's excellent. Really good. If y'all are interested in reading the one by Edgar Allan Poe, here is a link for you. I can't immediately find a really good link to... Is it just pain penetrates me drop by drop? Is that the...
That was Sappho, yes.
Okay.
Pain penetrates me drop by drop.
Yeah.
And another one of hers was, if you're squeamish, don't prod the beach rubble, which is...
Oh! I like that. So I've been watching a lot of the show Alone, which I don't know if anyone knows what that is, but it's a survivalist show, and they get dropped off, and typically they're on like a beach, and this one guy was complaining about having to eat seaweed all the time. It was funny. Okay, so I
Annabel Lee, the Edgar Allan Poe. So where he talks about, it was many and many a year ago in this kingdom by the sea. The kingdom by the sea is Coney Island. So I'm in New York. So Coney Island is Brooklyn, New York.
There you go. I did not know that little tidbit, so that's great. Patty, what do you enjoy doing when you're not busy with your writing, which now published, by the way? Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And your advocacy work. What do you enjoy doing?
So I really, and it actually was an offshoot of therapy. When I was in therapy, I was in EMDR. And if for anybody who's familiar with EMDR, it's all about basically taking, it's really well suited to trauma. And it's basically trying to forge connections in the brain so that you can resolve things. And there's a long setup process to do EMDR. And I was in a session, and my therapist said to me, it's always like, what do you need? What do you want? And I said, if I could, I would run so fast. And I never had run up until that point, but I started running, and I'm really into running. And so I'm very fortunate. I live very close to Central Park in New York. So I go to Central Park every day, and I either run or walk every day.
That's awesome. I used to be a runner because I was forced to run because I played soccer, and I loved playing soccer, and therefore had to be a runner. But boy, did I hate the running part.
It feels like sometimes it can kill you, but it's being outside. It's all of it. It's just, it's so, for me, so calming.
Yeah, I did
even if
always love. That's part of what I loved about playing soccer was that it was outdoors. Also allowed me to get a lot of my aggression out, but the running part just always, even when I was a kid, it hurt. It hurt my knees. So I'm not a runner now. But I love supporting people who are, so that's great. Bite says EMDR was massively helpful for me, but yeah, the setup is a lot. Yeah, yeah. So I haven't done EMDR, but I know through other people who have kind of what it's about, and it's supposed to be really, really incredible.
It was very helpful for me, and I actually do describe like EMDR, the setup. I mean, that is because it's a process. All of these things are a process, whether it's EMDR, chiropractic care, they're all their own thing. And what's interesting too is that I was very successful with EMDR, but I had a friend who tried it who it just didn't work for her.
Hmm.
Not everything works
Yeah,
for everyone, which is why it's really important to, if you're trying something, not to be discouraged just because one thing doesn't work. Sometimes you have to keep trying. And I mentioned it very briefly in my book too, but even when I was looking for a shrink, I interviewed multiple shrinks because it's really all about trust. And if you don't jive with somebody, you're just not going to get that far. And unfortunately, there's a lot of great therapists out there, but there's also a lot where you're like, why are you doing this for a living? Like they're just not right for you. So
yeah.
you
Yeah,
have to
and
keep going.
we've talked about that a lot as well, as far as if you don't like your therapist who you first try, because I had a bad experience with therapy. The very first time that I tried therapy, I truly truly believe she was just an awful therapist. And it just, I was like, wow, if this is what therapy is, it sucks and I'm not going to do it. And at the time, it was like, okay, well, that's the only therapist available on your health insurance plan, so you're kind of screwed. So I didn't go. And it was a couple of years before I tried it again. And as soon as I tried it again with a different therapist, she was wonderful. And I made so much progress so quickly because I had found the right person. So
Exactly.
if you're in a situation where you're like, man, either I'm not getting along with this person or I can't believe someone just said that to me or those kinds of things, there are some definite red flags. And if you're looking for like a list of red flags, join the Discord and ask Jessica Medina because holy crap, she can tell you. She's one of our community members and a therapist as well. She's got some good stories, but
Yeah, and I think honestly too, what I think people too often disregard, go with your gut instinct. If it doesn't
yeah,
feel right, it's not right.
yep, yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
not to disparage them. They might be fantastic, but just not right for you.
Yep. And there are so many more choices now. When I first tried therapy, it was years and years ago, and there just weren't very many options that were on my health insurance. But COVID really opened that up. Like, COVID really super added a bunch of people to lists and that sort of thing. So that's kind of like a good out of a bad, but that was really helpful. Bite says it's funny because my initial experience with therapy was this is fine, but it's not helping. And my super awesome therapist was, man, this sucks, but it's definitely helping. Yeah. Yep. So we have another question from the community, and that's where is your cat? Because we can see the cat tree behind you.
So, my beloved girl, I'm going to hold this up. My beloved girl, it's in my book. Her picture is in my book too. It's like my favorite part of my book. This little, you see that cute little tummy?
Yeah.
Cute thing.
Oh.
My darling Olive, she passed away last year. She was 19 and a
Oh,
half,
I'm so sorry.
but it was heartbreaking for me. And actually on my website, I have a whole page of pictures about her. I have, and I will say this flat out. I was sexually abused as a child, and I felt for a long time like I was incapable of love until I got Olive. Like, and
Oh.
yeah, she walked the darkest part of my journey with me. Like, she was with me for almost 20 years, and it was when I was in therapy. It was when I was writing the book. And I swear to you, this book took me a long time to write. And it was like I finally finished it, and she died. And I think she was just like,
Oh.
I'm done. I have done
She
all I
was
can do for
there. She was
you.
there for the ride, and the ride was done.
Yeah. She
Oh.
is a gorgeous girl. So if you go to
Yeah.
pattycabot.com, there's an Olive page.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
there's
that's
like my
really sweet.
newsletter I wrote after she died. She is amazing. So,
Yeah.
but I haven't been able to get rid of that. And I don't know that I
I
ever will.
wouldn't I wouldn't either. I'm sitting here now I'm petting Tyrion because I'm like, oh, Please don't die. And he's gonna murder me in my sleep probably, but that's okay.
She was vicious, my girl, but loved it. Loved her still.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Another question from the chat. This is from 488. He says, of the books behind you, which is notably uplifting? I love that question. Thank you.
Ooh, which is notably uplifting? Oh, now I'm looking at my books. Let's see.
Hey, isn't that the life? Like, don't we all just want to stare at our books? Come on.
Well, we do, but not everybody does. I have a very eclectic selection of books, and I actually have a lot more that you can't see. So,
I like
so
it.
they're arranged kind of by category. So I'm trying to think of what I consider the most uplifting. You know, I'm going to say I don't know that it's the most uplifting, but I really, really enjoyed it. It was A Man Called Ove, and they actually Tom Hanks made a movie out of it, and they changed his name to something more American. A Man Called Otto, maybe. But anyway, it's about this curmudgeonly guy, and basically he opens himself up to love, and he becomes friends with all these people in his community, and it's like he blossoms because he's finally able to, and I think it starts with a cat.
Aww.
Like suddenly, becoming part of his community and just being happier, and like everybody around him is so happy as well. So it's nice that way. Like you're never consigned to what you are. You can always break free. You can always evolve. You can always grow and change.
So the opening summary on Goodreads of that one is a grumpy yet lovable man finds his solitary world turned on its head when a boisterous young family moves in next door. That sounds right. I added it to my want to read already. There's a link for y'all in the chat if you want to have that as well. But that sounds awesome. I like it.
You were so quick with like the information, like somebody says something, you're like, and I can tell you about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter. I type for a living, so I type really fast. Byte used to try to race me to like get the link before I could, and it was usually like 50-50. She got half and I got half. It was funny. But thank you. Yeah, that's great. I just finished reading a book that it was like pulling teeth to get through. And by the time I was done with it, great information, but so densely packed that it was just like I can read 10 pages at a time. And it was super dense. So I picked up one of my old favorites and started reading it again. I was like, I need something to take to redeem my reading speed. So I picked up one that I know that I love and can just binge.
What was the book?
The book that I just finished was called The Five, and it's about the lives of the women who were murdered by Jack the Ripper. And It doesn't go into any of the story of Jack the Ripper. So if you're looking for something like that, this isn't it. It goes into here's where they were born. Here's how they grew up. Here are some of the other tragedies that they befell in their lives. And I think actually only 2 of the 5 were confirmed prostitutes, and a lot of people assume that all of his victims were prostitutes in some way, shape, or form. And if you read through all of these details of their lives, they really weren't. So it was a lot of, first of all, really heavy life stories because it's these 5 different stories and it's 5 of them, and there's no dialogue. It's all just fact, 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 with links that you can click on and go read more. So it's just really, really dense, which was, it was great. Like I said, very good book. But now I picked up Wizard's First Rule because it's a book that I read in high school, and I know that I can just get through it. Even though it will probably take me, I don't know, 16, 17 hours of reading to get back through it because it's a long book. Great book though. Really good. Highly recommend that one for sure. The easy read is a 16, 17 hour one. You're not wrong. So speaking of binge-worthy type stuff, what are some binge-worthy shows that got you through the pandemic, and what are you watching now?
Okay, so during the pandemic, and it was an awful time, and
Agree.
although I have to say this made it heaven because I spent day after day on my couch with Olive just binge watching The Walking Dead, which was not my kind of show,
I
But
love that
season 2
show.
came out and they kept promoting it and promoting it and promoting it. And I was like, fine, I'll watch the first episode. And I was sucked in. And there were like
Oh yeah.
so many seasons and so many episodes. And literally for months, she and I were like, I'm like, all right, it's Saturday. We're spending all day watching The
Watching
Walking
it. Absolutely. Yeah, the first episode of that one is crazy good. Like I enjoyed most of the show, and I don't think I've got probably a couple seasons to catch up on, but it's been so long since I watched it, I feel like I need to start back over, and that's not happening right now. But the first episode of that one really does. I'm
Oh,
invested.
sucks. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I will say this, not to spoil it for anybody, because it was like 12 seasons. It became like a stress test for me. I was like, now I'm ready for it to end. But the last episode of season 6 was the scariest thing I've ever seen on television. And the first episode of season 7 was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen on television. And I was like, I should have tapped out.
Now because I don't remember what happens in which season, so now I'm like, what happened? Which was the season 6 finale? I'll have to go back and look because now I need to know. Oh, that's great. Are you watching anything now like that?
I do, I actually, I was really into The Last of Us and Station
Mm.
11, so I'm very into like the sci-fi dystopian thing. I actually just watched, it's called Lioness. It was on Paramount. It's with Zoe Saldana and Nicole Kidman, and it was really good.
Okay. That was the one that came out in 2021.
No, I think it just came out this year.
Oh, maybe it's not
Lioness.
on. I'll have
It
to
was
find
good.
that one.
It was
Um,
really good.
oh, Special Ops Lioness?
Yes.
Okay, that's the one. All right, got it. There it is. Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but I'm adding it to my track right now. I have seen none of that
That's
one.
another one, like first episode, and you're going to be like, wow. And not
Yeah.
because of Nicole Kidman or Zoe Saldana. It's somebody who I had never seen before.
Mm,
It's like really good.
that's awesome. There was one, oh, it's gonna bother me if I can't think of the name of it. There was a like sci-fi dystopian world. There was a radio station in the top of the St. Louis Arch. I think it started with a D. I can't remember the name of it though. Really good show. It'll come to me in the middle of one of these other questions and I'll be like, da da da, and then no, it's not there. That's okay. So switching to tonight's topic, again, we are going to be talking about the intersection of eating disorders and sexual abuse. But your journey that you've kind of walked us through already with your bio towards healing and self-discovery is incredibly inspiring, just with little snippets. So can you share some of the turning points in your life that led you to confront this unresolved childhood sexual abuse?
And honestly, it really was about my weight. While I was always aware of my sexual abuse, it was something that I never thought about. I never talked to anybody about. I never told any of my friends. I mean, my mother knew, and she and my stepfather ultimately got divorced, but it was just something that was never dealt with, which I think is not uncommon. And as I got older, I definitely, starting in high school, I started gaining and losing a lot of weight, and it just kept going on and on and on. And I was great at losing it, but I couldn't maintain it. And I got to a point too where I think I felt like I put myself in unsafe situations. Honestly, I was like in my early 20s, I would go out, I would get wasted, I would like hook up with these strangers and then have this moment of lucidity where I was like, what am I doing? Like, who is this? And I just stopped going out because I just
Hmm.
was like, I'm like clearly not thinking. And so I stopped going out and, like years turn into more years and I really was becoming not as shut in because I still did things with my friends, but I really avoided men.
Hmm.
And I kept thinking nobody was interested in me, and it's because I'm heavy, it's because I'm this, it's because I'm that, which is obviously not true. Um, and I had been in therapy in my 20s, and while I definitely made a lot of progress, I didn't make any with my weight. But I was really kind of tormented back then, and we really focused on the day to day, and we never looked back. And I lost weight, I gained weight, I lost weight, I gained weight. And then finally, you were talking about the struggle to find a therapist, and I definitely had that too. And I was finally at a point where I had decided to pursue just somebody who dealt with eating disorders. And so, I narrowed what I was looking for quite a bit. And I ended up finding this person who specialized in eating disorders. And when she met me and she was talking to me and she was like delving into my history, and my sexual abuse came up, and she was like, it's not about your weight. Your weight is just a symptom. It's really about the sexual abuse, and that's what we need to focus on. And honestly, it was, it's what the universe wanted. The fact that she did EMDR was not something I had sought out. I had never heard of it, but she had done EMDR because she used to deal only with trauma patients. And, unfortunately, there is a strong linkage between addiction, particularly food, and sexual abuse. So, there's lots of reasons why people self-medicate with food, with alcohol, with drugs, with whatever, and it's like getting to the root cause. And I would say what I've learned, which is the one piece of advice I would try to pass on to anybody, and it doesn't matter what it's about. If you find yourself battling the same issue over and over and over, you're likely not addressing the root cause. And I think it's painful, right? It's really painful to delve into those things, and you have to be up for it, and it's no fun. But every day got a little bit easier, and it was a mercy that I didn't have any idea it was going to take me 12 years. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a mercy. Because I kept saying, when am I going to be done? When am I going to be cured? And she's like, I don't know. You're going to be done when you're done. Nobody knows. I don't know. You don't know. It's going to happen when it happens. And it infuriated me. I was like, if I just had a checklist, I would just go through it, because I'm very good about that. I finish things. It was a lot. And I would say, even when she and I made so much progress, and my weight, and I'm going to be very honest about this, I have maintained my weight, and that's fantastic. And I feel like I eat like a normal human being. But I'm female. I am still tortured about the way I look. It's not as bad, but I don't think that ever leaves people. And I feel like for women in particular, it's like always this comparison of, how do I look? Could I be thinner? Could I be this? Could I be that? I still battle that too. But it's a very different thing now than it was then, where I hated myself. Um, And one of the things, my weight was really the first thing that I managed to get under control. But then there was so much underneath it that I had to like kind of work my way through. And when I started really exploring other alternative therapies, it was because I was still stuck. So now I was thin, but I still wasn't meeting men. Like, so it's like, what's the issue now? And so we kept trying more things. And when I went to start working with a chiropractor, what was fascinating about that was I didn't feel anything. And it's like, when you have horrible things happen to you, you bury them, you don't feel them. And so, like, learn how to feel emotions so I could identify what I felt was tremendously difficult and really painful and scary.
Yeah.
I mean, I was afraid I was going to drown in like my grief and sorrow. Like, and those aren't pleasant emotions, they're not.
Mm.
And I would say for me, I was always very comfortable with anger, but anger is very mobilizing. Like, you can do something with anger. You can't do anything with grief. You can't do anything with sorrow. All you can do is feel it, and it sucks.
Mm-hmm. It does. It
I don't
does
know that
suck.
answered your question, but
Yeah, I mean, grief, we've talked about grief in a lot of depth, and it's one of those things that, yeah, it sucks. You do just kind of have to go through it. There's not something that's gonna magic cure here, take this pill or drink this drink or whatever, and it's gonna fix it. You just kind of have to sit with it, and it does suck. I mean, emotions aren't always pleasant.
No, they're not, and they're scary, and particularly for people who try not to feel them, because let's face it, it's a natural instinct. Anything that's painful, you want to tamp down as far as you can,
Yeah.
bury it underground. But the reality is it's going to come out in some way, shape, or form. It
Mm-hmm.
just is. And whether it's because you're in destructive relationships, you self-sabotage, people do all kinds of things without really understanding their motivations, and it's because they don't understand themselves, right? Like, there's just things you need to resolve to move
Mm-hmm.
forward.
Do you think if you'd known it was going to take 12 years that you would have stopped halfway through or at some point and said, it's not worth it?
No, but I think that's partly my personality type. I'm not one, I'm either in or I'm out.
Yeah.
So once I'm in, and I'm gonna follow it to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, I would have done it anyway. And I also feel like when I was in group therapy, I was the only person that wasn't in a relationship. Like everybody else
Yeah.
had their relationships. And I thought, if I had been able, because it was like so all or nothing, and I thought if I had been able to meet someone, I probably would have stopped, but I couldn't. And I had a goal. I wanted to find love. So until I found it, I was gonna, there was no stone I was gonna leave unturned. It really was. Like it was gonna be my life's mission to get to
Mm-hmm.
the other side.
Yeah.
So and I think it's funny too because it doesn't matter whether it's therapy or night school or whatever else people are thinking about. It seems so daunting. Oh, it's going to take me 6 years to go to night school. You know what? If you're lucky, time passes, and at the end of it, you're going to have the degree that you want.
Yeah. We were actually just talking about that last week. So last week we were talking about parenting after loss with Michelle Viacunis. I don't quite remember how to say her last name. But we were talking about, you never think you're going to be able to do something because it is scary. It's like, okay, well, whenever my oldest was born, I was a single mom. I was working full time. I was also going to school full time. And I look back now and I'm like, I could never. But at the time, it was just like, no, this is what has to get done. And it's kind of one of those things. It's like, no, this is what has to get done this day. This is what has to get done this month, this year, whatever it is. So, yeah, you're capable of a lot more than you give yourself credit for, I think. And sometimes you find yourself in a
Absolutely.
situation that if you had said, okay, this is going to take 12 years, it's like, that sounds terrible. But if you don't get to know, sometimes it's a little easier to just be like, I'm in it till I'm done with it.
Exactly. Yeah, not no, like I said, it was a mercy. But I think the other thing too is that, you are making gains along the way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little bit happier. I felt a little bit more in control, whatever it was. So there were definitely, like your burden starts to lighten as you make progress. So that definitely is motivating too. But as a runner and as somebody who forced themselves to run, I'm wondering if you know the saying, it's called run the mile you're in, which just
Oh, I
means
like that.
there's
Yeah.
only now. There's no past, there's no future. There is only this moment. There's only now. And when things seem overwhelming, just think about now.
Yeah.
That's all that you need to do is get through now. You worry about tomorrow.
I like that. Bite said, oh man, whoever invents the no more grief pill is going to be so rich. You are not wrong. You are not wrong. All right, couple questions in the chat. This one comes from Tib. They say, kind of a stupid thought. That's definitely not true, whatever it is. But I was just listening to a debate on if spanking a child is considered abuse. And they brought up how we almost universally agree hitting a pet is abuse. In a sense, society holds animals at a higher value than our own children. People are more likely to speak up about someone overfeeding their dog versus overfeeding their children. Why do you think that is? So that's so funny. This came up last week as well. We were talking about that dog mothers and dog babies have more rights in the U.S. than parents and their children who are like in the NICU and that kind of thing. So it's funny how stuff just kind of comes up over and over. But I'll let you address that if you want.
I don't have children. So let's start there. So I mean, I'm happy to offer an opinion, but I don't have children. And I would say I think it's very difficult for people to, people get offended if you. I once told we were making fun of my friend Connie because her beautiful dog Murphy, a golden retriever, she bought him a raincoat, and we looked at it and we're like, that's not going to fit him. Like that's not going to fit. And you would think we had assaulted her. Like she was so offended. Like, oh, don't fat shame Murphy. No, Murphy's gorgeous. It doesn't matter how much he weighs. My little girl, she was chunky and didn't matter at all. And let me tell you this, when you get old, you need to be a little bit heavier because she had been 16 pounds By the time she died, she was 12. You
Hmm.
need a little extra to sustain you when you get old and sick. So, but I think with children, it's like the same thing. It's a very personal thing how you choose to parent your child. And for me to say, I don't like the way you dress your child, I don't like the way you feed your child. Well, who the fuck cares? Who are you? Right?
Yeah.
Like, who are you? So,
And
but
I'll,
no, I don't think shit children. But I think people,
yeah,
there's a difference too between slapping somebody's hand away from a hot stove so that they learn
yeah.
versus assaulting them.
Yeah, same. And I'll also add in there, you never know what is causing a child's weight gain. Maybe they started a new medication that's for ODD or ADHD or something like that, and it's causing a weight gain. Maybe they're trying to work on medication balance in general. Maybe they're, really, really stressed or something like that. You never know what their actual diet looks like based on just looking at them. So weight gain and weight loss, so we can put that out there at the very beginning, is not always based on calories in, calories out. Period. I'm not a doctor. Patty, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you're a doctor either.
Nope, I am not. I don't even play one on TV.
Yeah. However, that being said, I know from personal experience it's not calories in, calories out, and I know from experience with kids, not my own kids, but with my former stepchildren, weight gain is sometimes just purely medication related. So there's those kinds of things as well to consider whenever you're. Not that you were judging anyone, Tib, but when you're putting those judgments from your own brain onto other people or even onto people's pets, Tyrion is not fat. He's just very super fluffy, and that is the God's honest truth. And then we've got another question as well. Is there some sort of mechanism that protects us from grief? I feel like it's the worst imaginable thing, but most of us get over it well over time, as opposed to other things in life, which can seriously scar them for life. I feel like that's pretty individual, Tib. I mean, grief and emotions impact people in very unique ways. It depends on your relationship with whatever you're grieving over. Especially, it depends on your own relationship with your emotions as well and how you express those. I cry over duck videos in a pond. Does that mean I'm really super sad that day? No. But if I'm not crying over the death of someone that I love, does that mean that I'm not sad? No. You can't always tell from the outside what's going on the inside. So I'll put that out there. Patty, your thoughts as well?
I mean, I absolutely agree with you. And I think that, so for me, when Olive died, and it's funny because the Queen died around the same time, and the Queen was old, and everybody was like, wow, I'm just shocked she died. That's how I felt about Olive. It didn't matter how old she was. I was freaking stunned she died.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe she would, pound for pound, she's the toughest creature on earth. And I was like, but Olive was ready. And I would say one of the things that helped is that there was no person that knew me that didn't know how much she meant to me and validated how special she was, how important she was. And I will also share, so my birthday is in October. It was my birthday last week. And when I got Olive, they estimated she was 3 to 4 months old, which put her birthday in like mid September to late October. So I gave her my birthday. So we had the same birthday. So she's been gone. It's been a year and a half. And her favorite thing was shrimp. So every time I went out, I had shrimp in her honor. I had people send me
Aww.
cards for her. I mean, because that's the thing about losing something that we love. We don't want them to be forgotten,
Yeah.
right? Like, because they mean so much to us. So for me, I felt like it was just so validating how much everybody who loves me knows how much I love her.
Mm-hmm.
So they in turn love her. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what? And it is what it is. And I look for her everywhere and I feel her everywhere. And I feel like she will always be with me. She found me in this life. She will find me in the next one. So
I love that.
And, and I'm going to end with, as much as I love my girl, she is worth every second of grief. I wouldn't trade a day, a second, a moment that I had with her. And
Yeah.
if that's the price I have to pay for it, I am happy to pay for it.
Absolutely. So pivoting back a little bit, that's okay. Look, I have a whole command on my channel for getting sidetracked because it's one of my specialties. The first one is technical difficulties. The second one is getting sidetracked. So we're right on track here for this conversation. But how does trauma affect a person's relationship with food and body image?
I can only speak for myself,
Hmm.
and it was really complicated, but I think, weight serves so many different purposes. So one, the obvious one, my thing was binging, and I found it very pleasurable. I love being surrounded by my favorite treats and eating them until I'm ready to pass out. I find I do. There is still, and it's in a very different way. But if my home is my castle, and if I travel and I come home, there is nothing cozier than to me than sitting down on the couch with my favorite snack and just chilling out. Like it's like cozy, comfy. So it's very pleasurable. So there's the pleasure aspect of it. I think food also was a way to punish myself. And one of the things that I thought of through therapy is that I always felt like what had happened to me, my sexual abuse, was my fault, which I think children, it's very common you think it's your fault. And food became a way for me to punish myself. And I thought, I wondered if I did it so that I could forgive myself, because that used to be
Mm.
my thing too. Like I would binge, I would hate myself, and I'd be like, I have to forgive myself for it. And my shrink would always be like, why do you have to forgive yourself? You ate too much. You didn't shoot anybody. You didn't kill anybody. It's not a hate crime. But it is. It's kind of a hate crime directed internally. So there was that level of it. I also felt like because I felt that I looked so unacceptable and repellent that it was a way to keep men away from me, right? Like, well, I'm not attractive enough, they won't desire me. So it's a way to keep yourself safe too. So there's like it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. There's so many, it serves so many purposes. And I think it depends on the purpose and you know.
Yeah. Are there specific types of eating disorders that are more commonly associated with survivors of sexual abuse, or is it just kind of
I think
individual?
I think it's individual, but I think from what I've read, it tends to be people that binge.
Hmm.
Um, Not anorexics as much. Anorexics have different issues.
Hmm.
And it's funny because I feel like for a lot of people, binging, it's becoming more recognized as an actual eating disorder. But I think for a long time, it really wasn't. It wasn't
Hmm.
considered like a real one, like anorexia or bulimia or any of those that kind of got a lot more attention.
Yeah.
Um, and it is interesting now that binging is more recognized, particularly like yo-yoing,
Hmm.
like yo-yo dieting and that's and that one I think is fascinating too, because you can be anorexic and be overweight, and you can be a yo-yo dieter, and it can be a span of like 6 pounds. Like it doesn't have to be 100 pounds, and you don't have to be 75 pounds to be
Hmm.
anorexic. It's kind of the mentality around it, like how you're starving yourself or eating enormous amounts of food and then eating nothing. It's just I think it's all of those games that go around it.
Yeah. And that's very similar with other mental illnesses as well. Like you can be a depressed person, you can have major depressive disorder, you can have chronic depressive disorder, you can have acute depressive disorder and still function. Like you can still go through
Yep.
your day and
Yep.
and someone could look at you and be like, "Well, you're clearly not depressed." And it's like, "Ah, joke's on you. I'm depressed as fuck." So,
Exactly. We all wear masks, and it's
yeah.
how effectively are able to project that. And I think that's every time you hear about a suicide in the news about a famous person who was so full of life and so happy,
Yeah.
and so that's what they were projecting. It's not what they were feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Do eating disorders typically manifest differently in this context of childhood sexual abuse than they do without that? Or is it just kind of a symptom that is the same across?
So, what I think is fascinating is that if you look at the statistics, which of course now that we're talking about it, I'm going to get wrong, but it's like the incidence of how many millions of people have eating disorders or struggle with their weight, and how many millions of people are sexually abused, they're not really linked anywhere. And
Mm.
there's a huge correlation between the two. And I was kind of stunned when I actually, for most of my life, my past was so deeply shameful. I didn't tell any of my friends until I had been in therapy for 3 years. And that was because my shrink was like, you need to tell people, like, you need to be able to let people in. But it was so deeply shameful. And when I finally got to the point where I was like, all right, I could maybe do this, I could maybe look around. There's like not that much out there. There's really not. There's some scholarly white papers about it, but there's nothing really out there for people that have these two things in common. And even I had joined Facebook. I'm 1,000 years old and I was very late to the game for that. But when I had joined Facebook and it was at the point where I was starting to really think about my book and I was like, well, I should see what other people think too. And you know what? There's not a group for that. There's plenty of groups for people who are sexually abused and there's plenty of groups for people with eating disorders, but there's not one in common. And, I posted a few things more so in the eating one where it resonated with people. But I think for a lot of people, again, we we don't want to focus on that which is super painful. We bury it deep inside and we focus on like what is more immediate. And what is more immediate is I hate myself because I ate X, Y, and Z. And that's where my time and my energy is focused.
Yeah. I know that eating disorders, you're talking about, the binge is a comfort to you. Binge eating is a comfort to you. And in some senses, in the case of anorexia, it can be about the control and regaining that sense of control. How do those needs relate to the trauma of abuse, and what healthier coping mechanisms were introduced to you via therapy?
Well, I mean, I think honestly, the first one was like really learning to identify how I felt. And I think the other thing too is that because I repressed everything, you know, I had, I would, I wouldn't ever share how I felt ever. And I felt like I wasn't heard when I was young and nobody saw me like, no, when things happen to you and nobody notices, it's like you're not seen, you're not heard, you're invisible. You kind of internalize that, right? So it's like, I'm not going to say anything because nobody hears me, nobody cares. And I think for me, I would just bottle everything up inside until I was so frustrated or angry that I would just explode. But I didn't ever have a way to just tell people how I felt. And I was very, very controlled and controlling. Like I controlled my environment. I still do. But in a I like to think of myself as a relaxed type A now. But but I would never be vulnerable with people. Like if that was too dangerous a position for me to be in. And when I was with the chiropractor, he said the most profound thing to me. He was like, I want to help you believe that you can be in control without being controlling and that you can be vulnerable without being powerless. And I was like, that is not possible. Because in my world, people prey on the vulnerable, and I was not going to be that person. And, but it's true. You can't, unless you're willing to let people in, to let yourself be seen, to let yourself be known, you're always misunderstood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very, very hard to take those steps, but it gets easier every time you do it. And that was a big part of it, was being able to express to people, I know you didn't do it intentionally, but you hurt me,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
I like I like what you're saying. Your chiropractor said you can control without being controlling, and you can be vulnerable without being powerless. I'm sure that is hard, given the background of sexual abuse, to take in and digest, but I feel like that's a really powerful thing to understand in your life in general, regardless of what you've been through. Uh, and hard to do. I want to come back to the chiropractic care in just a minute, but we do have a question in the chat, so I'm gonna get to that because I want to know more about that one. So Tib asks, while not always is a common problem to binging to cope with sexual abuse, then purging, I'd imagine the secrecy and shame of both can do a number. So you're asking, is binging, when you're using that to cope with sexual abuse, is it always accompanied, or is it more likely to be accompanied with purging as well?
I personally didn't purge.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, I never have.
Yeah.
Which thank goodness, like That's another thing. Like that's just one more complexity you don't need. One more thing to that a big challenge. I mean, I feel for people that do that, but I would say binging is deeply shameful too, right?
Yeah.
Like, who are you honest with that about? And that was actually really interesting too. That, my shrink was the only person who knew me other than Olive, and at the point where I was starting to become more open, and it's baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. It just so happened I became very good friends with somebody from my gym who was also a runner, and it just so happened she was a psychiatrist. So we would run and we would talk about things, and she was very thin and she was very open, like shockingly open compared to me. And she was the first person I really shared with about my binges. And she felt like she didn't eat like a normal human being either. So it was like, but it is very secretive. All of these things are secretive.
Yeah. And I know that there are a lot of complications with purging as well that people might not realize. So just some of the damage that you can do to your body beyond the damage that eating disorders can do mentally and physically. But purging has some really serious side effects as well. So yeah, I don't know the stats on that, Tib, but there's one person's experience for you. So I love that you talk about EMDR and chiropractic care in the terms of kind of your healing journey. How did those therapies specifically help you address the emotional and physical aspects of your trauma? Because I think a lot of people don't connect chiropractic care with mental health care, but also in my experience, they are super tied together. I've just never heard anyone else who feels that way. So tell me more.
So chiropractic care is a little bit different than just going to your chiropractor because your neck or your back hurts. So let's start there. So I had been in therapy and I was working with my therapist and I felt stuck. I couldn't move to where I wanted to get, and neither one of us could figure out what I was stuck on. We thought it was about fear, but we just didn't know. So she worked with other shrinks and she was like, "Do you mind if I talk about you?" And I'm like, "No." And she said, she wanted to come back with suggestions for us to try and get me unstuck. One of them was group therapy, which I was adamantly that was never going to happen. And one of the few times we fought, it was about group therapy because she wouldn't let it go. Long story short, it was the last thing I did. But there's a reason why something becomes the last thing you do, right? But I was finally ready to do it. But I was not ready to do it then. And somebody had mentioned chiropractic care. And I was like, what is that about? And so basically, it's based on touch, and I didn't like to be touched, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
is not at all uncommon. And I went to meet with this chiropractic, a doctor, and basically he explained to me he had a skeleton, and he said, when people experience trauma, it gets locked inside their body, and it's like your body becomes locked in this perpetual fight or flight mode. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like about trying to release all of that energy. And so basically it seems like nothing. It's light taps on your body, like on your spine, and it could be your feet or your head or whatever, and somehow or other it's like it connects to that part of you. And when I met, and again I was running, and at that point I was doing marathons too, and everything always hurt. And he said to me, he evaluated me, and he's like, "Wow, your right leg is shorter than your left." And I'm like, "I don't think so, but okay." And after a few visits, he was like, the way you hold tension in your body, it's like you're twisted. So your pelvis is twisted. So it's like your leg is shorter. And after a couple of sessions, my legs were the same length again because they are the same length. But it is amazing. But what was interesting about him is I never understood how it worked. To be honest with you, I
Mm-hmm.
was always like, he would talk to me and I'm like, I don't understand how this works. But somehow or other it did. But it really was about releasing all of this stuff. And there's a lot about it in my book because I was so accustomed to not feeling anything. And when I did, it was terrifying. And he and I spent a lot of time together, and I really would get to a point where I was just biting and vicious with him. And it's because, you know what, I was so threatened by everything that was happening. And he was great because it got to a point where I had to tell him because I felt so guilty. And so there was nothing worse than crying in front of somebody. Like the movie Grease, there are worse things I can do, but to cry in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
like I hated to cry in front of people. And I had this conversation with him where I was like, I feel like I'm mean to you and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, the fact that you could have this conversation with me, he's like, you should never feel like your progress is like doing anything bad. He's like, I'm so excited that you can talk to me about this. And he's like, and he likened it to, he was like, feeling emotions is like an eggshell cracking and it's frightening. And he's like, and I get that it's scary. And he's like, but you're doing it so well. But it's like goes against every instinct and, everything in you to like let that out. But it was tremendously helpful.
Yeah.
And then I still didn't get where I wanted to go. So I moved on to the next thing. And I still didn't get where I wanted to go. Moved on to the next thing. But along the way, I kept making all of this progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your chiropractor sounds like they were just full of nice little tidbits.
It's full of gems, full of gems. And the highlights are all in my book, I promise. It's like
That's awesome.
But my shrink, I had actually given her a rough draft of my book when I first wrote it. And I will say this, the genesis for my book, because when I started therapy, and EMDR is heavy. Like if you've never done it, it's like it really gets into some shit. Like it stirs things up and it's a lot. And I didn't talk to anybody. I had a lot of friends, but I didn't talk to anybody. And I'm a writer. So I would come home after every session and write down what happened and how I felt. And it was the way I could process it. And when I decided to write a book, I had 1,200 pages of raw material from all of these experiences. So it was actual things that people said to me. And when she read my book, she was like, I sound so smart. And I was like, you are so smart. It's like you're boiling down all of these great things that people have said, like that are really, really insightful and helpful.
Yeah. Now, you said that you resisted group therapy, but you did eventually do individual therapy and group therapy, and those both played a role in your healing process. So tell me a little bit about that, and what advice do you have for folks who may be considering either individual or resisting group therapy as a means of healing from trauma?
Well, so I actually did work with my shrink the entire 12 years. So even when I explored these other alternative therapies, I was still seeing her.
Mm-hmm.
She was the one constant. So the other things might have come in and out. Like I worked with
Yeah.
the chiropractor for a year and a half. I did group therapy for 2 years. Like so, but she was always there. And when she had suggested group therapy and I was always like, no, 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 no. And when I finally said yes, she said, oh, I know somebody who's had a group for more than 20 years. It's, mostly people with your background, people who were sexually abused as children. It's all women, blah, blah, blah. And she said, I'll call so-and-so and see if she has an opening. And I had been in therapy when I was in my 20s. I started in my 20s and I went twice a week for 8 years and it was torturous for me. I thought it was intrusive if somebody asked what I did over the weekend, so I hated therapy. But I recognized that I needed to be there because I was really that unhappy. And I think sometimes when you're that unhappy, so when I was in my 20s, I basically thought if I'm not happy and my life's not fulfilling by the time I'm 40, I'm going to kill myself. And then I lowered it to 35.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started thinking about 30 and I was in my 20s, I was like, you know what? Like, I need somebody to help me. Like, I couldn't see the point of it. So I started going to therapy and I didn't get any relief with the things I went in there for, which were my weight, my jobs, and men. Like, I was just unhappy. And when I met her, she had said to me, she's like, you don't have 3 problems with your weight, men, and your jobs. You have 1 problem. You hate yourself. That's your problem. And so we really spent all of this time working on me. And I did get much better, but I didn't get relief with those 3 things. Anyway, fast forward a number of years. My current shrink says, I know so-and-so, she leads this group. It was the same shrink. And so it was the original shrink. Like, file that under What a Small World. And I live in New York City. It's not like there's only 2 or 3.
Right?
There's a huge universe of shrinks out here. And when I called her, the original shrink, to talk to her about joining her group, she didn't know my story. She didn't know my past. And she spent 8 years working with me,
Oh, wow.
and she was like, how could I not know? And I said, I'm sure I told you when I first met you, but I was so unhappy that we never looked back. We really focused on the day to day to get me
Yes.
through the day. So, anyway, group therapy, and you're like, and how's that relate to the question I asked you?
No, I
So,
mean,
group
that's really good.
therapy was really interesting because my fear for group therapy, and again, I am of a certain age. I have been to Weight Watchers more times than you can imagine. And in the day, you had to go to Weight Watchers meetings in person. Like
Yep.
there was no online. You went, and there was nothing I hated more than the people that would sit in those meetings and bitch and whine about the fact that they couldn't have as many brownies and margaritas as they wanted. No, you can't. If you want to lose weight, you can't. And I hated that. I hate the whining. Just, yeah, it sucks, but we're doing it or we're not. So, I had told her, I was like, that was my fear with group therapy, that I was going to go in there and everybody was going to bitch and whine. Oh, poor me, poor me. And it wasn't like that. And my current shrink that I was seeing wanted me to go because she wanted me to find community. And because I had never talked about my story, I really didn't know anybody with a history of mine like mine. And it was riveting to be in a room full of people who had similar experiences. It was. It was. I definitely found community. Not happy community, but people who understand because they endured the very same things.
Yeah. It's, you know, one of those things of we were talking about this before we even started, but feeling less alone because you're around someone who knows where you've been, maybe not your exact story, but knows kind of what you've been through a little bit, makes such a difference. Such a difference. Really, really does. So, and I know
I
that
agree.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, right. Well, I was going to say, I think over the last, 5 years or so or whatever, where, people talk about representation, that's exactly it. It's
Hmm.
seeing somebody who looks like you, who has walked the same path as you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that it's often difficult for survivors to talk about their experiences outside of a group therapy setting. I'm sure it's difficult in a group therapy setting as well. But what motivated you to share your story more openly beyond group therapy? And what impact do you hope to have on others who are dealing with similar traumas?
So again, I had said that, I was very closed and I did not share. And I, not to be in a spoiler here, but I finally got what I wanted. I finally found a relationship and it was a mind fuck. And he was amazing and like helping me, but it turned my world upside down. Like it was terrifying because, I had spent my whole life basically defending against being where I was. And that was the source of my conflict. I wanted something that in my deepest recesses of my soul, I was afraid to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that somebody will hurt me, that I will, that my safety will always be a second to somebody else's passions. So, I had all of this conflict. And when I just had decided after I was with him, I was like, oh my God, I should write a book. But I really didn't know what the purpose was. I really didn't. I thought, you know what? I think it's for me, and maybe it's just to like exercise all of my demons once and for all, and maybe it's to help me be more vulnerable. It really took me several years to be like, you know what? I think I actually want to publish the book. And when I had decided I wanted to publish the book, I have several friends who have written books. One who is a much older person, and she was the first person I told. And she said, great, send me 10 pages. And we were going to meet for lunch. And I sent her the pages like almost at midnight the night before. And the next day she was like, I didn't think you were going to send them. And I was like, I didn't think I could. Like it was that hard for me. And the first time I wrote a query letter, I broke out into hives. Like it was
Oh,
like a
wow.
really, yeah, I mean, I have come so far. It's kind of amazing to me. But that's the thing. It's like teach a man to fish. Once you do something, it gets easier and easier and easier. And I swear it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Because there would have been a time where I would have told you I would have sooner been the Queen of England than I would ever told anybody about my past or strangers or written a book and revealed myself.
Mm-hmm.
What seems impossible is not. It's a failure of imagination. I do believe that.
Did the process of writing your book impact your understanding of your own story? And did it bring any unexpected revelations as you're kind of getting everything down onto paper?
I don't know if I found that as much, and I was a little concerned that I was going to have 1,200 pages of my weight and what I ate. Like, and fortunately, that is not what I ended up with. I think the shrink who led my group therapy, she had said to me, there is no substitute for experience. And I do think that is true. And I think that sometimes in life we try to arrive at an answer or a conclusion, or we want to, something, you and I were talking about this before we started, you want to reconcile things, you want to make them right somehow, you want to be able to put it to bed and say, ah, that's finished, it's done.
Yep.
And you know, one of the things about therapy too is that you can understand something intellectually. I could say, of course, a child being sexually abused is never the child's fault. Ever, under any scenario, is it ever the child's fault? And I could tell you that, and I believe that. But if you asked me emotionally, do you believe it was your fault? Yes, I always believed it was my fault. And that's what matters. Not that I understood it intellectually, but that emotionally I believed it. And until you can get the emotion and the intellectual parts to come on board and be aligned, you're always going to be lost. And what ended up ultimately happening for me is something happened in my life where I thought, it's not my fault. There's nothing I could have done to prevent it. And while it was completely different than my childhood abuse, it was that same sense of I never could have affected it because it was never about me. And that was kind of my big epiphany. And that it did finally, like all the ruin was gone. Like I finally got it.
Yeah. That's got to be such a weight off your shoulders, too, just in that moment.
It was. It was. I mean, and I think so many, like, and that's why I don't want people to get discouraged if they're like, oh, I've been in therapy for 6 months and I'm not fixed yet. There's so many milestones along the way. There's so many things you learn about yourself. There's so many, I think two of the greatest things that people can be in life in terms of attributes are being resilient. Number one, I think that's the most important thing, is being resilient, getting back up after you're knocked down. And not everybody is naturally resilient, but the beauty of it is that resiliency can be taught. So it's like you just have to seek out ways. Like there's all kinds of stuff you can find online about how to be more resilient. And it's like anything else. If you want to learn the piano, if you want to take up guitar, you're not going to suddenly be, Eddie Van Halen. You got to work at it, right? It's like day by day, and you get better and better and better, and it gets easier and easier and easier.
That reminds me of the advice from Terry Tucker, which for those of you who were here for the Terry Tucker interview, one of his pieces of advice was do something hard every day, and that'll help you build that resilience a little bit. So if you're interested in more from that, feel free to go back and reference that interview. But doing something hard every day is one way to kind of build that resilience a little bit. It doesn't have to be phenomenally hard. Give me making a phone call you don't want to make. But every time you do something that's hard, you have a period of, I made it through, and I can recover from that, and I'll move on and do something hard again tomorrow. That's building resilience. And there are plenty of websites, articles, etc. that you can go and find about that. But if you're looking for something just quick, how do I start? That's one easy way, one easy way to do it.
I agree. And another thing too is that it's important to remember, my book is called Not That Girl Anymore, because it got to a point where I hit critical mass and I was like, I'm not that girl anymore. And I think it becomes very easy to see ourselves as who we once were, even if it no longer matches who we are now. Yeah. And don't ever underestimate how strong you are, how tough you are, how tenacious and resilient you can be.
Amen. Family and societal reactions can often complicate the healing process for survivors of sexual abuse. How did you navigate those challenges, and what support systems were instrumental in your recovery? We've talked about therapy, group therapy, those kinds of things, but what was really the support around you that was helpful?
I have amazing friends. You can choose your friends. You're born into a family.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, my family was not involved in it, and my mother is still alive, and I am close is not the right word, but I definitely help my mother. We have a relationship. I accept her for who she is. My mother has never really taken responsibility for what's happened. She's never got it, and now she's an older woman, and I wouldn't dare dream to, kind of, she doesn't know I wrote a book. And it's not that I'm ashamed of it or hiding it, but I have no desire to hurt anybody either.
Mm-hmm.
She's 86 years old. Like, no good would come of
Yeah.
any of it. And again, my goal is not to hurt anybody. And I would say, people often talk about, well, I need another person for closure. You do not. Closure is something that you can achieve by yourself with help from other people, right? Like, I feel like I did really well in my therapeutic journey. And again, it wasn't like my stepfather ever took responsibility. It's not like anybody ever told me they were sorry. It's not like anybody ever helped me. It's like I made my way through it on my own. And, that's great. That's great, because a lot of people don't have somebody else who's ever going to be able to say, oh, I shouldn't have done that to you.
Mm-hmm.
The people who hurt us the most almost never take responsibility for it. It's just life.
Yeah, that's true. For folks who are listening or watching and might be struggling with both, either recovering from childhood sexual abuse or an eating disorder, or one or the other, what advice can you offer in terms of seeking help or finding understanding communities or starting their own healing journey in the context of that intersection?
I think that we do live in a nice time in that these things are so much more out there than they ever have been. So there are plenty of resources. RAIN is RAINN.
Mm-hmm.
They're a great network. NEDA, which is they're the Eating Disorders Association, the National Eating Disorders Association. They can certainly help people from that perspective. I feel like there's a lot of great groups out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, if you struggle with these things, try and be kind to yourself. Like, you don't have to solve all of the world's problems by tomorrow. It's just taking one small step. And maybe that means, if you were like me and you never told anybody about any of it, maybe you start small. If you have somebody you trust, or even calling a helpline and being like, I am struggling with X. Or, reveal a little bit about yourself to people that you know to be kind, who care about you.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to, if you have, tortured relationships with certain people that are always kind of assholes to you, don't go to them. Like, and that's, and unfortunately, people do
Good
that
advice.
over and over and over again. The people
Yeah.
who hurt you, don't seek them out. Seek out somebody that you think genuinely cares about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Because
there's
people
lots
that
of,
genuinely care about you want you to be happy. They want you to succeed.
yes.
They're not jealous of you. They're not threatened by you. They're just happy for you.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of online options as well. If you want to be anonymous with it, calling a tip line is one way to do that as well. I put both of those websites, the RAIN and the NEDA websites, in the chat. Heart Support is another really good one. They have a great forum where you can go online and it's anonymous. You create your own username, etc. And you can just talk to people who are going to give you overwhelmingly supportive feedback, not therapy. Emphasis on that it's not therapy. There may be therapists on there, but they're not your therapist. But it's one of those things that sometimes it just helps to talk about it. And there are ways to do that. If you're looking for ways to do that, I'm happy to help you find some ways to do that. If you're not sure, please just reach out and I can help you with that.
And in the back of my book, I do have a resources section where I also kind of explain what EMDR is and how you can find a therapist that does EMDR, chiropractic care, sex therapy, group therapy. And the most transformative thing I did, honestly, in addition to all of these great things, I started meditating. And I would recommend meditating to everybody, because meditating is all about being present. And I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, a lot of people look back. I was always looking forward. I was always trying to figure out what was going to happen so I could figure out how I was going to manage that. And then, it's like all about gaming the solution to it. And you know what? I wasted a lot of time and energy on things that oftentimes never came to pass.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like meditation was real. It's all about now. It's all about now.
I like that. We've talked about meditation a lot on this channel. I'm terrible at traditional meditation. I'll put it that way. Give me a coloring page and I'll meditate for an hour. But just the be quiet. I think actually a lot of it comes back to the fact that I have tinnitus and I cannot sit in silence or sit and listen to something that's like super calming music, because all I hear is the noise in my own head. the literal noise that's always in my own head. So
and you know what? I think meditation can be whatever somebody needs it to be. And when I started meditating, I did Headspace, but I would say what I consider to be meditation for myself, I'm sure there are plenty of people that would be like, that's not meditation. It is to me. It is to me. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. And it's true. And I found that to be true for myself as well. Well, it is time for the magic moment. And if you are not familiar with the magic moment, I have this beautiful magic wand that has made me blurry. There we go. If you could wave this magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
That it's not your fault. That would be it. That it's not your fault for any of those things. It's not your fault.
Absolutely. I think that we take on a lot of fault for things that we don't need to generally in life, but especially around, childhood sexual abuse and eating disorders as well. Those are two big ones. Yeah, that's a great one. Well, I'm going to open it up. Chat, if y'all have any other questions, feel free to pop them in there and we'll make sure to get them addressed. And Patty, I'll just open it up to you and ask if there's anything you want to throw out there as far as resources, or, we did a couple of the websites that you talked about, or recommendations or anything like that. And I will also post your socials one more time. That includes your website, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and then just one more plug for your book as well. If you are looking for a copy of Patty's book, feel free to pop into our Discord and you can find the links there. If you don't want to get into a Discord, go to Patreon. There's a free copy of it there. So check those out as well. And Patty, I'll just open it up to you for a little bit.
Well, I was just going to say thank you so much for this conversation, which was amazing. It was very fun. And it was, these are such heavy topics that we talk about, but they don't always have to be full of despair, right? Like and I think for anybody going through this, I mean, my heart goes out to you. It's hard. I know that firsthand, you know firsthand, like how difficult some of these things can be. And I would say, never lose hope. I mean, and that was kind of the thing that got me through it, is that underneath it all, there was always hope. And if anybody knows the story of Pandora's box, it's like basically there's all the evils of the world are trapped in this box, and they open up the box and they all come out, and it's pestilence and flood and murder and just despair. And they slam the lid shut on the box, and the only thing that's left inside is hope. There is always hope at the bottom of everything, and just don't forget that.
Yeah, that's really great. Bite Mark says, I just want to say thank you so much for being here and for the book. Absolutely. Thank you for the copy of the book. I appreciate that. So right just whenever I reached out to Patty earlier this week, she was like, good timing, I just finished my book. So that was great. Yes, thank you for that, for sure.
Oh, my pleasure. And I would say the most important thing to me about the book is that it find its tribe, because we are a tribe, and that's why it's available for free. I just want people to know that it is possible to undo the Rome within. And just as I am possible, so is everyone else. I'm not special. I mean, I may have a lot of perseverance, but I'm not special. So if I can do it, you can do it. So. And if you do read the book and you find it helpful, if you would leave a review so that somebody else can find it, that'd be great.
I was just going to say, if you want to help that book find its tribe, if you read it, go review it. Review it on Goodreads or wherever you do all of my reviews, first of all, go in the Discord because I don't know why, I just love sharing them with everyone. But also I write reviews constantly on Goodreads. That's where I review everything. If you review books, even if it's just a line, go
Exactly.
review.
It doesn't
go
need to be
review it.
long.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that'll just expand that reach. You have no idea how much of an impact that has. Just one review can really help. So make sure that you do that. Well, Patty, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time. This was a really good conversation.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you having me, MommaFoxFire.
Absolutely. All right, Chad, give me just a minute to disconnect with Patty and I will be right back. Stick around. And that's a wrap for today's episode, folks. I hope you found as much value in the conversation with Patty Cabot as I did. From shedding light on the complexities of eating disorders and sexual abuse to sharing personal insights and strategies for healing, Patty's wisdom truly shone through. As we navigate the ups and downs of life, it's essential to remember that healing is a journey, not a destination. We all have our own battles, our own scars, but it's how we face them that defines us. So whether you're taking small steps towards self-discovery or embarking on a journey of healing, know that you are not alone. Together we can create a space of empathy, understanding, and unwavering support. Before we part ways, I want to ask you a little favor. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it helpful, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a review. Your feedback means the world to me and helps reach even more listeners and people just like you who might benefit from these kinds of conversations. Plus, it's like a virtual high five, and who doesn't love a virtual high five? All right, remember, even on the toughest days, you're stronger than you know, and you're never alone in this journey. Keep shining bright, keep spreading love, and until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.